Commander Jake Harrison stood on the bridge of his ship, looking out at the dark space around them. His ship was called the UES Horizon, and it was one of the biggest human ships in this part of the galaxy. Jake was 45 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much fighting over the years. The other alien races in the galaxy did not like humans very much. They called humans Deathworlders because humans came from Earth, a planet that the aliens thought was too dangerous for smart life to grow on. Earth had heavy gravity that would crush most alien bones. The air had oxygen that would poison many alien species. The weather was wild and violent, with storms that could destroy cities. But humans had grown up on this harsh world, and it made them tough. It made them strong. It made them able to fight when other species would give up. The aliens did not understand this. They thought humans were just violent and stupid. The Galactic Council was a group of the most important alien races. In the galaxy, they made the rules for trade and war between different worlds. Humans had asked to join this council 3 times, and 3 times the aliens had said no. They said humans were too primitive, too violent, too dangerous to be trusted with important decisions, so humans were forced to work in the worst parts of space. They took jobs mining dangerous asteroids or carrying cargo to places where other species were afraid to go. Human ships patrolled the outer edges of known space, where pirates and smugglers liked to hide. Jake had been doing this kind of work for 20 years. He was tired of being treated like a second-class citizen in his own galaxy. But he was a soldier, and soldiers followed orders. His orders were to keep the peace in this sector and protect any ships that needed help. Lieutenant Amy Foster was working at the communications station. She was 28 years old, short brown hair and quick fingers that could work the complex alien technology better than most humans. She had grown up on a space station and spoke 5 different alien languages. Her voice was worried. It's broadcasting on all frequencies at the same time. Jake walked over to her station. What kind of signal? It's a distress call, but it's coming from Zalari space. That's weird because the Zalari have never asked for human help before. Zalari were one of the oldest and most powerful races in the Galactic Council. Their homeworld was called Zephyria, and it was covered in beautiful crystal cities that glowed with their own light. The Zalari looked like tall, thin humans, but their skin was pale blue, and they had large silver eyes. They were very smart and very proud. The Zalari had been some of the loudest voices against letting humans join the Galactic Council. Their leaders had said many times that humans were too violent and too primitive to be trusted with advanced technology. Clean up the signal and put it on the main speakers, Jake ordered. Amy worked at her controls for a few minutes. The static slowly cleared away, and they could hear a voice speaking in the Zalari language. The ship's computer translated the words into English. This is Prime Minister Keth of the Zalari Republic. Our worlds are under attack by an unknown enemy force. They call themselves the Devourers. They are destroying everything in their path. They consume our cities, our people, our very life force. The Council fleets have been destroyed or scattered. We are requesting immediate assistance from any available vessels in the area, even human ships. Please, we are dying. Our civilization is ending. Help us. The bridge was completely quiet for a long moment. Jake could hardly believe what he had just heard. The proud Zalari, who had spent decades calling humans barbarians, were now begging for human help. "Sir, what should we do?" asked Amy before. Jake could answer. Another voice came over the emergency channel. It was Captain Lisa Morgan from the EOU's Defiance, another human ship in the area. "Zalari Republic, this is Captain Morgan of the human fleet. We have received your distress call. What is your current tactical situation? How many enemy ships are you facing?" The Zalari voice that answered was full of panic and fear. "Morgan, thank you for responding. The enemy has consumed 12 of our worlds in the past week. Their technology is unlike anything we have ever seen. Our energy shields cannot stop their weapons against us. Our greatest warships are powerless against them. We have perhaps days, maybe hours, before our home world of Zephyria falls to them." Jake felt a cold fear in his stomach. If these devourers could destroy the advanced Zalari fleet so easily, what chance did humans have? Human technology was much simpler than what the Council races used. Human ships were tough, but they were not as advanced. All human vessels in this sector, this is Admiral Kate Sullivan. The voice of humanity's fleet commander came over the communication system. Admiral Sullivan was a legend among human space forces. She had fought in every major battle for the past 30 years, and ordering all available ships to converge on the Zalari sector immediately. Set course for Zephyria at maximum speed. Prepare all weapons and defensive systems for combat operations. Jake looked around his bridge at his crew. These were good people, brave people who had chosen to serve in the human fleet, even though it meant being treated badly by most of the galaxy. They deserved better than to die fighting someone else's war. But Jake also knew that this was bigger than human pride or alien prejudice. If these devourers were really consuming entire worlds, they would not stop with Zalari space. They would keep going until they had eaten everything in the galaxy. Crew, set course for Zephyria. Maximum burn on all engines. And get me a tactical analysis of everything we know about this enemy. As the human fleet began moving toward Zalari's space, Jake could not stop thinking about what they might find there. He had spent his whole career fighting pirates and smugglers, people who could be reasoned with or scared away. Sounded like something much worse. Still, humans had one advantage that the other races seemed to forget. Humans came from a death world, a planet that had tried to kill them every day for millions of years. They had learned to survive when survival seemed impossible. They had learned to fight when fighting seemed hopeless. Maybe that would be enough. Maybe being forged in the fires of Earth had made humans into something the galaxy desperately needed. The human fleet came out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyria system and saw something terrible. The beautiful crystal cities on the planet below were dark and silent. The towers that used to glow with soft blue light were now black and dead. Huge alien ships, dark as space itself, circled the dying world like hungry sharks. "My God," whispered Ben Rodriguez from his position at the tactical station on the UES horizon. Ben was a young officer, only 25 years old, but he had good eyes for reading battle situations. There must be 300 of them out there. The enemy ships were unlike anything in the human databases. They did not look like machines built in factories. Instead, they looked alive, like giant sea creatures floating in space. Their hulls seemed to move and shift, changing shape as the humans watched. Ships were completely black, so dark they seemed to eat the light from nearby stars. Small fighter craft moved around, big ships in patterns that made no sense. They moved too fast and changed direction too quickly for any computer to control them. It was like watching a swarm of angry insects. Captain Dan Parker commanded the heavy cruiser USS Valiant. The ship was one of the biggest in the human fleet, with thick armor and powerful guns, but looking at the enemy force, Dan felt very small. His science officer, Dr. Grace Turner, was studying the readings from her instruments. "Captain, I'm detecting something very strange," Grace said. She was a smart woman who had studied alien technology for 15 years. "The enemy ships are draining energy directly from the planet. They're not just conquering Zephyria, they're literally sucking the life out of it." Admiral Sullivan's voice came over the fleet communication system. "All ships maintain formation. Stay alert. We're looking at an enemy that destroyed the entire Zalari defense fleet. They know we're here, so expect them to attack at any moment." The Devourer fleet began to move, but they did not move like normal ships. Instead of using engines to push themselves through space, they simply appeared in new positions. One second they were far away, and the next second they were surrounding the human fleet. "How did they do that?" asked Communications Officer Ryan Lee from his station on the EU's Valiant. Ryan had been working with space technology for 10 years, but he had never seen anything like this. Before anyone could answer, a message came through the communication system. But it was not like any normal radio signal. The voice seemed to speak directly inside their heads, bypassing their ears completely. It was like having someone whisper thoughts into their minds. "Deathworlders," the voice said. It sounded like many voices speaking together, creating a harmony that was both beautiful and terrifying. We have consumed the memories of this system's defenders. We know about your species. You are different from the others. Interesting. Join us willingly, and your deaths will be quick and painless. Admiral Sullivan did not hesitate to answer. Unknown ships, you are attacking innocent worlds and killing billions of people. Leave this system immediately, or we will stop you by force. The laughter that came back was like the sound of breaking glass mixed with screaming wind. Your weapons cannot harm us, Deathworlders. We have absorbed the technology of 1,000 different species. We are beyond anything your primitive minds can understand. You will feed us well. Captain Lisa Morgan was commanding the UES Defiance, a fast attack ship with heavy guns. She had been studying the tactical data since they arrived, and she noticed something important about the enemy ships. All ships switch to kinetic weapons immediately, she ordered over the fleet channel. Forget the energy weapons. Load solid ammunition. This order caused confusion throughout the human fleet. Kinetic weapons were old technology, basically just pieces of metal shot at very high speed. The aliens used much more advanced energy weapons like lasers and plasma cannons. Most human ships still carried kinetic weapons, but they were considered backup systems. Captain, are you sure about this? Asked her weapons officer, Lieutenant Carl Hayes. Look at the readings, Morgan explained. Every time the Zalari ships fired energy weapons at them, the enemy absorbed the energy and got stronger. But I don't see any reports of kinetic weapon testing. Let's see how they handle old-fashioned bullets. The human fleet fired their first salvo of tungsten slugs and explosive shells. The results were immediate and shocking. The enemy ships, which had easily absorbed the advanced energy weapons of the Zalari fleet, were completely unprepared for simple metal projectiles moving at incredible speed. 3 of the smaller Devourer ships were torn apart in the first few seconds. Pieces of dark hull material spun away into space, leaking strange fluids that glowed with sickly light. The enemy response was swift and terrible. Dark energy beams reached out from hundreds of ships, striking the human vessels with devastating force. But something unexpected happened. Unlike the Zalari ships, which had simply dissolved under this attack, the human ships held together. Commander Paul Davis was on the bridge of the UES Tempest when the first enemy beam hit his ship. The lights went out and several systems failed, but the ship kept fighting. Damage report, Paul called out. Hull breaches on decks 3 and 7, reported his damage control officer. But the main structure is holding. Engineering says the fusion reactor is still online. Paul suddenly understood why they were surviving when the Zalari had not. They're trying to drain our life energy, but our ships don't work that way. Zalari technology uses bioenergy sources that these things can absorb. Our ships run on fusion reactors and chemical explosives. There's nothing for them to drain.
Ow.
The battle turned into a brutal close-range fight. Human ships moved in close to the enemy vessels, trading shot for shot at distances that would have been suicide against any normal opponent. The Devourers had superior numbers and strange technology. But for the first time in their conquest, they faced an enemy that their main weapons could not simply absorb. Captain Susan Kelly commanded the destroyer U.S. Reaper. Her ship had lost half its systems to enemy fire, but she kept moving forward, her remaining guns blazing continuously. "Keep firing," she shouted to her crew.
Ow!
These things have been picking on civilized races too long. Time to show them what happens when they mess with Deathworlders. The space around Zephoria became a graveyard of twisted metal and organic matter. Human ships were damaged and some were destroyed, but they kept fighting with a determination that the Devourers had never encountered before. Every human captain knew that if they failed here, these creatures would move on to consume human worlds next, and for the first time since their rampage began, Devourers began to retreat. The battle around Zephoria had been going on for 6 hours. The space between the human fleet and the Devourer ships was filled with floating wreckage from both sides. Human ships were battered and smoking, but they kept fighting. Many had lost weapons or engines. But their crews refused to give up. Captain Susan Kelly stood on the bridge of the UES Reaper. holding onto her command chair as another enemy blast shook the ship. Half of her crew was dead or wounded, and her ship was barely holding together, but her guns were still working, and she kept firing at the massive Devourer vessel that was trying to destroy them. "Captain, we have boarding pods coming in fast," called out Security Chief Tony Martinez. Tony was a big man with scars on his face from fighting pirates in the outer systems. So looks like they're going to try to take the ship. Susan nodded grimly. The Devourers had apparently decided that if they could not destroy the human ships from a distance, they would board them and kill the crews directly. All hands, prepared to repel boarders. Break out the small arms and blade weapons. The alien. Boarding pods hit the side of the ship like giant metal fists, cutting through the hull with tools that melted steel like butter. Dark shapes poured through the holes, moving with liquid grace through the corridors of the human ship, but the Devourer warriors were not prepared for. What they found inside, they'd fought many different alien species during their conquest of the galaxy. Most of those species were peaceful and civilized, with little experience in hand-to-hand combat. The Devourers expected to face the same kind of easy victims they had encountered before. Instead, they met humans. Sergeant Nicole Brooks led a squad of Marines in the defense of the engineering section. Nicole had grown up in the slums of New Ament, Detroit, where fighting was a daily part of life. She carried a simple chemical rifle and a steel combat knife, weapons that any alien would consider primitive. The first Devourer warrior that came around the corner was 8 feet tall and moved like flowing water. Its body was covered in dark armor that seemed to absorb light, and it had claws that could cut through metal. It was a perfect killing machine. It's designed to hunt and destroy. Nicole shot it 3 times in the center of mass with her rifle, then stabbed it through what she hoped was its heart with her knife. The creature fell down and did not get back up. "These things bleed just like everything else," she told her squad. "Keep shooting and keep moving." The battle in the corridors of the human ships was brutal and fast. The Devourer warriors were strong and quick, but they had been fighting civilized species for so long that they had forgotten how to deal with truly violent opposition. Humans had learned to fight on a world where everything was trying to kill them. They had thousands of years of experience in warfare. The boarding action turned into a disaster for the Devourers. Human crews fought with a combination of modern weapons and ancient tactics that the aliens could not counter. Every corridor became a killing ground, every room a fortress. Meanwhile, Admiral Sullivan was coordinating with the few surviving Zelari forces on the planet below. The crystal cities were mostly dark, but some defensive positions were still active and could provide information about the enemy fleet. "Admiral, we have located what appears to be their command ship," reported the Zelari military coordinator. His voice was weak and full of static, but the information was clear. "It is positioned behind their main battle line, approximately 50,000 kilometers from your current position." Sullivan studied the tactical display on her screen. Devourer command ship was huge, at least 10 times the size of any human vessel. It was surrounded by layers of smaller ships that formed a protective screen. Getting to it would mean flying directly through the heart of the enemy formation. "All ships. This is Admiral Sullivan," she announced over the fleet communication system. "Prepare for a concentrated assault on the enemy command vessel. We're going to punch through their defensive line and take out their leadership." Captain Frank Collins commanded the battleship U.S. Independence, the biggest ship in the human fleet. His vessel had taken a beating during the long battle, but its heavy armor had protected the crew and weapons. "Admiral, that's a suicide mission," he said over a private channel. "We'll have to fly through their entire fleet to reach that target." "That's exactly why it will work," Sullivan replied. "These creatures have been fighting civilized species that use careful, planned tactics. They expect us to stay at long range and try to wear them down slowly. They won't expect us to charge straight at their most important ship." The final phase of the battle began with every surviving human ship forming into a tight formation. Large battleships took the lead, using their heavy armor to absorb enemy fire. Smaller ships followed behind, ready to exploit any opening the big ships created. Commander Alex Turner piloted the light cruiser U.S. Falcon in the second wave of the attack. His ship was fast, but lightly armed, designed for reconnaissance rather than heavy combat. But Alex had volunteered for this mission because he understood what was at stake. The human formation accelerated toward the enemy command ship at maximum speed. The Devourers threw everything they had at the approaching fleet. Dark energy beams, swarms of fighter craft, and weapons that seemed to bend space itself, all focused on stopping the human attack. Human ships began to die. The destroyer U.S. Thunder exploded when a concentrated barrage overwhelmed its defenses. The cruiser U.S. Storm lost power and drifted helplessly as enemy fighters swarmed over it. But the formation held together through pure determination and the leadership of experienced officers who had learned their trade in the harsh schools of Earth's military academies. Alex's ship reached the enemy command vessel with its hull burning and half its systems offline. "This is for every world you destroyed," he said as he emptied every weapon his ship had into the alien flagship's command section. The concentrated firepower of the remaining human ships proved too much for even the massive command vessel. Organic hull began to crack and split, leaking dark fluid into space. Strange lights flickered along its surface as internal systems began to fail. Then something amazing happened. The other Devourer ships suddenly became confused and disorganized. Their coordinated attacks became random and ineffective. Ships began to collide with each other or drift aimlessly through space. Dr. Grace Turner, still alive aboard the damaged U.S. Valiant, made the connection. "Admiral, I think they operate as a hive mind. The command ship coordinates all the others. With it damaged, they can't function properly." The tide of battle had finally turned in humanity's favor. 3 days had passed since the great battle ended. The space around Zephyria was still full of wreckage from both human and Devourer ships. The enemy fleet that had seemed so powerful was now nothing but floating debris and dead hulks. Of the alien ships had simply stopped working when their command vessel was destroyed. Others had tried to escape, but human crews hunted them down one by one. Admiral Sullivan stood in the observation room of the UES Horizon, looking down at the planet below. Zephyria was still badly damaged. The beautiful crystal cities were dark, and many would never shine again. But the Zellery people were alive, and that was what mattered most. "Admiral, we have an incoming message from Earth," said Communications Officer Sam Wright. Sam was a young man who had joined the fleet to see the galaxy, but the battle had shown him things he would never forget. "It's the Secretary General herself." The holographic image of Earth's leader appeared in the center of the room. She was an older woman with gray hair and tired eyes, but her voice was strong and proud. "Admiral Sullivan, I have been watching the reports from Zephyria. The entire galaxy is talking about what happened there. The Galactic Council has called an emergency meeting to discuss the situation." What happened next was something that no human had ever expected. The same Galactic Council that had rejected human membership 3 times was now offering not just to let humans join, but to give them a permanent seat on the most important committee. The Security Council controlled all military decisions for the entire galaxy. Prime Minister Keth of the Zellari Republic spoke to the Council Assembly in a speech that would be remembered for generations. His people had been the strongest opponents of human membership, but now his words were completely different. "We called them savages and primitives," Keth said to the gathered representatives. Said they were too violent, too dangerous, to be trusted with advanced technology. Called them Deathworlders, as if it was something shameful. We were right about one thing: they are products of a death world. But what we failed to understand is that this made them exactly what the galaxy needed when death came calling for us all. Captain Lisa Morgan found herself appointed as the first human military advisor to the Council. Her first briefing to the alien leaders painted a picture that frightened them all. The Devourers were not unique, she explained to the assembled delegates. Our analysis of their technology and tactics suggests they were just one of several threats from outside our galaxy. There are things in the dark spaces between galaxies that view our entire spiral arm as nothing more than a source of food. The alien leaders sat in shocked silence. For thousands of years, the various species had focused on building peaceful civilizations and advancing their technology. They had never considered that something might be watching them from the void, waiting for the right moment to attack. "This is why the galaxy needs humanity," Morgan continued. Not because we are the smartest or the most advanced, we are not. But because when something comes to destroy everything you have built, you need defenders who know how to fight back. You need people who have learned that sometimes violence is the only answer to violence. The months that followed brought massive changes to galactic society. Human military officers were assigned to work with alien fleets throughout Council space. They taught the alien crews what they called Deathworld tactics, ways of fighting that seemed crude and primitive, but proved to be devastatingly effective. The elegant energy weapons that had been standard throughout the galaxy for centuries were supplemented with simple kinetic systems. Alien engineers learned to build ships that could take damage and keep fighting, rather than the delicate vessels they had preferred before. Commander Jake Harrison, promoted to admiral after the battle, found himself in command of the new Galactic Defense Force. His flagship was still the UES Horizon, but now it flew alongside ships from dozens of different species. The human ship had become a symbol of hope and protection throughout the civilized worlds. But Jake knew that the real test was still coming. Long-range sensor stations had detected movement in the empty space between galaxies. Something vast was stirring in the darkness, possibly drawn by the destruction of the Devourer fleet. Whatever had sent the Devourers to feed on the galaxy might be coming to investigate. Why their servants had stopped reporting back, the golden age of peace that the galaxy had enjoyed for so long was ending. Wars were coming, probably bigger and more terrible than anything the civilized races had ever seen before. But for the first time in their history, they had protectors who were ready for such conflicts. The alien species began to understand something important about humans. Earth had not made them cruel or evil. Instead, it had taught them that life was precious precisely because it was fragile. They fought so hard to protect others because they knew how easily everything could be lost. Human colonies began to appear throughout Council space, usually near important worlds that needed protection. Human families came to live among the aliens, bringing their children to play with alien youngsters. The Deathworlders were no longer seen as dangerous outsiders, but as the galaxy's guardians. Admiral Harrison often stood on his bridge, looking out at the stars and thinking about how much had changed. Humanity had started as outcasts, barely tolerated on the edges of civilized space. They had been rejected and insulted, treated as second-class citizens in their own galaxy. But when darkness had come calling, when an enemy had appeared that could not be reasoned with or negotiated with, the galaxy had discovered that it needed exactly the kind of people that Earth had produced. They needed fighters who would never give up, protectors who understood that some things were worth dying for. The human fleet stood ready in the darkness, watching and waiting. Their ships were not the most advanced in the galaxy, and their weapons were often simple compared to alien technology. But they had something that no amount of technology could replace. They had the will to fight when fighting seemed hopeless, to stand when standing seemed impossible. The Deathworlders were ready. For whatever came next, let the darkness come. Humanity would be waiting.